Well, today is a beautiful, beautiful day. The sun is shining and the sky is blue and the birds are singing. It's a perfect day to do many, many things outdoors, but it's also a perfect day for a story. So today I'm going to tell you a story, a very, very special story, and a very, very old story as well. This story is so old, it's from a time when all of the lands that we know today were completely different. There were no towns, there were no roads, there were no cars, there were no shops. But there were trees. But not like today. Today we have many, many, many different types of trees, but in this time of the story, there was only one type of tree, and that tree was a fir tree. And I did say that there were no towns and there were no houses, but there was one little small gathering of people, a tribe, and they lived in a scattering of mud huts in a place called Jabberjerome. Now, some of you may have heard of Jabberjerome, but most of you probably haven't. It was off in this direction. And Jabberjerome was a great place to live. Most of the people who lived in Jabberjerome were so happy and content. The children in particular loved living in Jabberjerome. They would spend all day playing in the fields and damming up the stream and climbing over rocks and looking through the grass, trying to find insects and all kinds of different bits and bobs that they could use in their play. But there were a group of people who lived in Jabberjerome who weren't very happy. They were the very, very, very old people. The great-great-great-great-great-grandmas and the great-great-great-great-great-granddads. And they weren't very happy because their elbows had started to ache. Their knees were sore, their hair was falling out, and their teeth were crumbling. And they would watch the children play and climb and jump and run. And in the back of their minds, they would think how great it would be to once again be strong and beautiful. And one day, one of the old men was having a particularly tough day. He sat on the edge of his mud hut with his head in his hands and he began to wail. Oh! Oh! He wailed and he called out, I wish I could be strong and young and beautiful forever and ever. And as he called out, the words came out of his mouth. Whirled in front of him and they went up into the air, and as they got up into the air, a gust of wind caught them and blew them across the fields, through the forests, over the hills, until they came to a river. And there the words spiraled up the river. Up and up they went, until they arrived at another man who was also sat by the river. This man had a long cream cloak that went all the way to the ground. He wore a cream hat that hung over to one side. He carried a wooden staff, and around his neck he wore a piece of string with a silver acorn. This man was a wizard, and he heard these words, I want to be young and strong and beautiful forever and ever. And he knew of a spell, a way that he could help the sender of these words to get eternal strength and eternal beauty. So he packed all of his things into his bag and he tied them onto his staff and he put them over his shoulder and he set off walking. And he walked for days and days and weeks down the river, over the hills, through the pine forest, until he came to Jabberjerome. And when he arrived at Jabberjerome, he called all the very, very, very old people together. He said, is it true that you want eternal strength and beauty. And the old people said, yes, it is true, it is true. He said, then follow me down into the meadow, for I have a spell that will give you just that. And all the old people gathered round, and they followed the wizard down into an open meadow. And there the wizard stood with his staff in his hand. He lifted his staff and he pointed it at the ground, and the first bit of magic appeared. As he pointed it, it began to shake, and he lifted it. And as he lifted it, it created a huge wooden archway. People were aghast. He really was magic. They all stood and looked at the archway, and the wizard said, whoever passes through the wooden archway will get eternal strength and beauty. Now all the old people looked at each other. Maybe this was a trick. Should they trust the wizard? And then all at once, without any words, they all made a huge dive for the archway. And as they got there, they all got jammed and stuck in the arch. They were pushing and shoving and trying to get through. And then all of a sudden, the pressure was released and they all fell and scattered around the meadow. And the wizard stepped back. He crossed his arms and he watched. He watched as the magic unfurled. You see, as every single one of the old people began to stand up and stretch an arm and a leg, as they reached up to the sky, every single one of them turned into trees. There was an oak and a birch and a cherry and an alder and a hazel and an elder. Ah, the wizard said, there you are. The magic is complete. Now as you grow taller and taller, you will become stronger and stronger. And with every turning of the earth, and every new spring, you will get new leaves and new flowers. And every year, your beauty will become more and more. And he put his staff over his shoulder and he turned and he headed out. And he went back to Jabba Jerome, and when he got there, he got all the children together. He said, do you want to know what I have done with the great-great-great-great-grandmas and the great-great-great-great-granddads? And they said, yes, where are they? He said, head to the meadow and there you will see something you have never seen before. Something so beautiful. And the children ran. And as they went to the meadow, they arrived at the first mixed woodland that they had ever seen. A whole plethora of trees before them. They ran in and they began to climb on the oak, and they began to sit in the shade of the silver birch and the beech. And the more time that they spent there, they began to hear the voices from the trees, the voices of their elders. And day after day, week after week, the children came and they played in those forests. But as the children grew older, they forgot about the forest. And the forest was left in silence. And that is why I'm telling you this story today. You see, the forest calls out for you. The forest wants the children to be there, to play and climb and shelter. So go. And when you go, look amongst the trees, because still to this day, if you look carefully, you will see the faces of the elders staring back at you. And if you listen carefully, especially on a windy day, you will hear them calling and singing too. Enjoy your adventure in the woods. See you next time.